Greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call a cushion for the throne. And I want to start off with a petition that was launched last week calling for more diversity on the inquiry board or the inquiry process. I think Kareem's video explains it best.
I want a panel of people sitting next to the judge that will have the same ethnic background, religious background, upbringing, sitting alongside the judge. And not only that, you know the old saying, you know, 2 or 3 heads are better than one, you know, 4 pairs of hands are better than 1 pair of hands. It's just, there's so many pros to it. There's no cons.
See, what we need to remember is that judges hate juries. They hate the idea of what they call perverse judgments taking places. And this is the idea that the public, just a layperson, can actually overturn their expertise, their knowledge, their wisdom, and run on gut instinct. Now, do you remember in September when Moore-Bick made it clear that he isn't inviting anyone on the panel because it would risk undermining his impartiality?
I know that many of the survivors would like me to appoint someone from among their own number, or perhaps another local resident, as one of my assessors. Many of them can, of course, provide valuable evidence, and I shall ensure that all their evidence is heard and carefully considered. But to appoint as an assessor someone who had had direct involvement in the fire would risk undermining my impartiality in the eyes of others who are also deeply involved in the inquiry. I've therefore come to the conclusion that I cannot take the course they would wish me to adopt.
I think there's been a bit of confusion about the difference between assessors and panel members. Now, assessors, which will be a group of experts that will report to the judge, and they will be experts in certain fields, but ultimately it's up to the judge to report back to the Prime Minister whatever he feels right. Now, the panel will sit alongside the judge. They will report directly to the Prime Minister. They will have the same powers as the judge.
He has no intention of letting that happen. And sadly, any idea that a member of the public or any panel that sits alongside Moore-Bick would have the same powers as a judge who's being paid by the government to deliver a manageable result. But Moore-Bick isn't stupid, and he has anticipated this demand for diversity amongst his inquiry by appointing an assessor, a guy by the name of Joe Montgomery. Now, he's going to be the urban regeneration expert, and I don't know the guy. I can't even tell you anything about his reputation, about his professional credentials. All I do know is that he worked for the Office of Deputy Prime Minister on tackling inequality. Didn't really work out. And he's also in charge of regeneration in Lewisham. And many of us know that if you've got concerns about gentrification taking place or having a role in the use of cladding, then perhaps this guy may not be 100% the right guy to be answering the right questions. But like I said, I don't know. Could be a wonderful guy. Oh, and talking about petitions, the Grenfell MediaWatch petition was actually denied by the government. Now, they're claiming they didn't understand what we meant by giving custodial sentence to anybody found guilty of using banned building materials. And that's a blatant lie. Australia just passed a similar law, and that's exactly what we're calling for. I mean, maybe not exactly. We wanted some retrospective powers added to it. But yeah, very interesting, isn't it? Democracy at work. I mean, while the government's petitions department is claiming they don't understand, the national insulation industry clearly understands, because they cancelled their award ceremony where they're going to pat each other on the back. These are the sort of people that would have been covered by the law that we're trying to champion, because of course someone decided that democracy is not something that should be voted by the people, but by a bureaucrat.
The Grenfell Tower fire on the 14th of June 2017 spread up the outside of a block of flats that had been wrapped in plastic. The cladding that burned on Grenfell Tower was made of combustible plastic-filled decorative panels covering a thick layer of combustible plastic foam insulation. Together, they're thought to have contained as much fuel as 30,000 litres of petrol. 3 years after getting inside government, Celotex took to the road. The building regulations had been rewritten to make more insulation compulsory for new buildings. Since the plastics industry sat round the table with civil servants in 2011, the UK market for plastic insulation has doubled. As the plastics industry capitalised on the green agenda, the building regulations failed.
Until the Grenfell fire, many experts would have claimed that that system had served us well. But now we have witnessed a catastrophic failure on a scale many thought impossible in 21st century Britain.
But Sky News has established that the government department in charge of building regulations had been warned for years that the system was dangerously broken.
I was reading some work by Russ Timpson. He's a fire engineer. He was named International Fire Person of the Year by his peers. And what Timpson was arguing is that fire sprinklers should be made mandatory on tall buildings. But while central government might not want to get it, there are others around the UK that do. Leicester is starting installation of sprinklers on its tower blocks. Even non-governmental bodies like Nottingham-Trent University is actually removing cladding from its student accommodation because it fears that the stuff that's being used is similar to that was used on Grenfell. And the rich and the wealthy that don't depend on government services or university campuses, they're also actually still taking action. What we're seeing is that in Glasgow, luxury apartments are being patrolled by fire wardens 24/7 for £2,000 a day. Last week, members of the Grenfell MediaWatch team also attended an event called Did the Media Fail Grenfell?
I think Grenfell has made the invisible decline of industry very visible, and I hope that it will make a difference. And there are organisations that are doing something positive about this.
It was a very interesting debate, but perhaps it should have been called, are they continuing to fail the residents of Grenfell? The UK has a long history of commissioning inquiries, reports, investigations into social issues, things that really require urgent attention. But each and every single time, nothing ultimately changes. So when Alan Milburn and his entire social mobility team resign en masse, and they've come to the conclusion that there's actually no hope of progress towards a fairer Britain, we know there's going to be challenges.
I've reached the conclusion, sadly, that with the current government there is little, if any, hope of progress being made towards the fairer Britain that the Prime Minister has talked about.
And so while all that's going on, what is our beloved government doing? Well, this morning LBC, yes, LBC, announced that 17 Tory councillors are not standing for re-election. They're being deselected in Kensington and Chelsea next year. Anyway, I'm pretty confident that this election stunt won't put off those people who are going to be attending the protests outside the council offices this week, really demanding the council actually puts more work, more effort into housing or rehousing the Grenfell residents who are still living in temporary accommodation. Anyway, I want to close by saying that next week the government's going to spend a truckload of money on a spiritual ritual, a Jamboree. It's going to attempt to bamboozle everybody to make it clear to the world in its televised BBC Live broadcast that everyone has moved on, that they've given the families of Grenfell justice for Christmas, that now those pesky, troublesome residents are in the pocket. And I'm saying, please don't allow yourself to be used like that. And I'm not just talking to survivors, I'm not just talking to the families or the communities, but I'm talking to the public. I'm talking to all of you there who will be tuning in on BBC, watching as the media does its thing, watching as the politicians do their thing. And make no mistake, there's going to be a lot of handshaking, there's going to be a lot of kneeling, and a lot of bowing. And when I say bowing, I'm talking about, yes, Mum, thank you, Mum. How'd you do, Mum? Good to meet you, Mum. Thank you for doing all this. Yes, we really appreciate it. But this isn't justice. In 2007, the British government tried something with my ancestors, those who were involved in Ma'afa. And the way I kept focus is that I never lost sight of the fact that we must not betray our ancestors, and that is those who perished in the massacre. But equally as important, we must never, ever betray our children, because they inherit the mess. They inherit the things that we feel are too difficult to deal with. They inherit them, and it's not their fault. We've got to do better than that. So, I'm not saying don't go. I believe in spiritual rituals for healing. But this event, I don't really believe it's about healing. I believe it's a PR stunt. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I don't see a lot of people there bowing and kneeling and begging. And I'm going to close and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.